I think my parents sold my sister for $1 million. But hold up. I need to backtrack and let me start from the beginning. Growing up, we didn't have much money. Sure, we had enough to survive, but we were by no means well off. Some nights, all we had to eat was some packets of mac and cheese, and other times, all we had was stale bread with a bit of peanut butter spread on top. We lived in a tiny house with tiny rooms and a tiny TV. All four of us lived in that small space. My parents and my sister and I. And we didn't exactly all get along. My sister Jessica was 4 years older than me, so we found it hard to bond. She was pretty rude to our parents as well, and she would always yell at them, breaking things with her huge temper. One time, she grabbed this pretty vase my mom had just bought. It had such pretty floral designs with pinks and blues. And then she threw it across the room in a rage, smashing it into dozens of pieces. She threw it because she was annoyed at her mom for not letting her go to a party that night. Me? I was pretty quiet most of the time. I kept to myself, and I always tried to stay out of Jessica's way. We had to share a bedroom between us, and of course, she got the whole bed to herself. She forced me to sleep on the floor, on the tiniest bit of blanket. I would complain to my parents, telling them how unfair it was, but they couldn't do anything. I think they were scared of Jessica. She was bigger than them, even as a teen, and she could hurt them if she wanted to. Jessica was basically the boss of the house. There was another time when I accidentally spilled soda on Jessica. I was in the kitchen with the drink in hand when Jessica burst in and barreled straight into me. The cup of soda went flying and landed right on top of Jessica. I was petrified. When I looked into her eyes, I saw pure fury. I swear I saw a glint of red pass through her eyes. She chased me around, both of us screaming, with me in terror, her with rage, until she grabbed me and slapped me in the face. I started crying and my parents came in asking what happened. Jessica eyed me from the corner of her eye with a clear message. You tell them what happened and you're dead. I shook my head at my parents, saying I tripped and fell. They believed me, but Jessica still gave me a dangerous look afterwards. My sister was horrid. I really think those were some of the worst years of my life. Every day was a nightmare, trying to survive around Jessica's hot temper. My parents were kind, but they were weak around Jessica, and she got whatever she wanted. Well, at least whatever we could afford. But then something changed. Gradually at first, before everything in my life literally flipped on its head. We started getting better groceries. My mom would come home, sometimes even smiling, and her bags would be full of fresh vegetables and meat and fish and healthy snacks. She even bought herself and Dad a bottle of this really classy wine. I was so confused. Neither of my parents had gotten a new job. How could they afford all this expensive stuff? But I didn't think much of it. I was just glad for the better, tastier food. A few weeks after that, my parents bought a new car. It was a sleek red Honda with 6 seats and TV screens inside. I couldn't believe it. This must have cost a huge fortune. Where was all this money coming from? One time I asked my mom about it, but she just laughed it off, saying we had the money, so I didn't need to worry about it. But I was still confused. Jessica loved the change in lifestyle. She loved the money we seemed to suddenly have out of thin air. My parents would buy her new clothes, jewelry, and makeup. I got some new toys and clothes, and I even got a gaming console. It was incredible. I stopped asking my mom about the money. If she said we were fine, then we were fine. But then one morning I woke up, and at the breakfast table, one seat was missing. Jessica hadn't gotten out of bed. My parents started eating without saying a word. Had they not noticed Jessica wasn't up yet? It would be rude to start eating. But then they ate anyway. And being terrified of Jessica as I was, I didn't say anything either. Then it came around to noon, and Jessica still wasn't up. I had stayed away from our bedrooms, as sometimes Jessica would get moody if I woke her up. It was the weekend, so it was completely understandable that she would sleep in. But when the hours fell away and my parents started cooking dinner, I was starting to get concerned. "Where's Jessica?" I asked my parents. They looked at each other, giving an odd look. Then my mom spoke. "Don't worry about her. She's fine." "Is she sick?" I asked, worried. My dad shook his head, chuckling. "No, she's not sick." I looked at them both perplexedly. "What happened?" "Don't worry," Mom hushed. "Just eat your dinner." I was used to obeying and staying quiet, so I did just that. I ate my dinner, steak with fries, and went to bed. As I slowly opened my door, I was expecting to see Jessica's sleeping figure in the bed, but she wasn't there. It was completely empty. I gasped, running straight into my parents in a panic. "Jessica's gone!" I cried. My mom looked at me seemingly unfazed. "Jessica's just going to spend some time away for a bit, but don't you worry." I looked at Dad in urgency. "What? Where's Jessica?" "She's in a better place." My eyes widened at the words, but he patted my arm consolingly. "Oh, not like that," he said. "Jessica is fine. It's just she is going to be away for a few days. But you should be happy. You have the whole room to yourself." I nodded slowly. "But where is she?" Mom frowned. "Stop with all these questions. Go to bed." "But," I started until my dad cut me off. "Listen to your mother," he said. I looked down defeated and trudged over to my bedroom. The bed was still empty. I could sleep in it tonight. I crawled into the covers. It was so comfy. Maybe I could get used to Jessica being away for a while. That night, I had the best sleep of my life. My parents said Jessica would be gone for a few days, but then the first week went by, with still no Jessica. Then a couple of weeks. Then a month. I hated to admit it, but I missed Jessica. I asked my parents again where Jessica was, but they just told me to be quiet. And meanwhile, more and more money seemed to be pouring in. We got a new TV. We got new kitchen appliances. I saw my mother walking around with a diamond necklace. My dad had a Rolex watch. I even got a new phone, the latest edition, and yet there was no Jessica. I started to get suspicious. "When is Jessica coming back?" I demanded. My parents would just look at me blankly and tell me to stop asking questions. I felt like I was the only sane one in the family. They acted like Jessica's absence was nothing, like she wasn't even their daughter or my sister. I had no clue what was going on. But then one day, as I was looking for my phone in my parents' bedroom, I found something that changed my life forever. A letter addressed to my parents was hidden under their bed. I opened it up and gasped as I read each line. It went like this. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, thank you for your cooperation. We will take good care of Jessica. It was a wise choice to send her to us. You need not worry about her. She'll be just fine. I also advise you to tell your other daughter nothing of this. It's for the best. And congratulations on the money. I hope you enjoy it. Sincerely, Stephen Smith." I was shocked. I was literally paralyzed. I couldn't comprehend what I had just read. What did it mean? Where was Jessica? Who was Stephen Smith? I didn't know what to think. But then my mind started to click into place. The money. The sudden buying of expensive things. Where had it come from? I knew my parents still had low-paying jobs. The money didn't fall from the sky. It had to come from somewhere. And I had a feeling it had something to do with Jessica and this letter. I kept looking under the bed, looking at small pieces of paper. All I found were a bunch of receipts and small letters from other random people. But then I found something. An envelope hidden at the bottom of the pile. It was yellow and had fancy writing scrawled on it. I opened it up and pulled out the card inside. On it read a check for $1 million, addressed to my parents, funded by Stephen Smith. That's when it hit me. They sold her. They sold Jessica for the money. Jessica was always mean to them, and she always behaved badly. They probably would have been glad to sell her off. I didn't really know much about selling children, but they probably sold her off for child labor or something, where she would spend her days working tirelessly away. How could they do something like that? Sure, Jessica could be difficult at times, but that didn't mean they had the right to sell her. While I was still trying to process this unbelievable realization, I heard the door open up behind me, and standing in the doorframe, silhouetted by the outside light, were my parents. They looked at me in shock, at the letters in my hand, and at the $1 million check. A dark look cast over their face. I felt fear strike me, but I immediately jumped up. "You sold Jessica!" I screamed at them. "What is wrong with you?" They didn't say anything. They just rushed toward me and yanked the pieces of paper from my grasp. I backed away terrified. They looked at the $1 million check, eyes hungry. "Is it okay?" I heard Mom whisper. Yes, she didn't rip it. My dad replied. I couldn't believe it. They cared more about this stupid check than their own daughter? "You're horrid, horrid people!" I yelled at them. "You sold Jessica just for a stupid check. I hate you!" They looked up at me, shocked at the anger in my eyes, and stepped slowly towards me. Darling, it's not like that, said Mom. Oh, what? You traded her or something? I cried. That's still no excuse. We didn't sell Jessica, honey, said my dad quietly. We sent her. I interrupted him. Yeah, to Stephen Smith. I know all about it. You sold Jessica into labor or something. Then, to my horror, my parents started laughing. I shrank back in repulsion. How dare you laugh at something like this? I accused. My mom wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. Oh, darling, that's not at all what happened. I frowned. Well, if that's not what happened, then where's Jessica? My parents looked at each other, then nodded. They explained it all to me. A few months back, they entered this lottery competition, which was funded by this billionaire, Stephen Smith. He was hoping to give back to the poor community, and he offered a free lottery to those who could hardly afford to live. They entered the lottery never believing they would win, but they just had to try it out. And to their joyous surprise, they won. But Stephen Smith told them it had to be kept secret because other people in the neighborhood might get jealous. They won the $1 million and life was great. But Jessica was still mean and undisciplined. They feared she would grow up into this selfish, rude person. And that's when Stephen Smith offered to take Jessica from them. Not to a labor factory, but to a rehabilitation camp. She would be treated by professionals to learn discipline and to treat others with more respect. She was going to be there for a year. It was Stephen Smith's own project, but it was very expensive. But since my parents had $1 million, they could afford it, and they sent Jessica there for her own good. But I was still confused. Oh, why didn't you tell me this before? I asked. My mom sighed. Stephen Smith told us it was for the better not to tell you. You might feel scared or worried, and we didn't want to put that kind of pressure on you. But I see now that it was the wrong choice. We should have told you ages ago. We're sorry, said Dad. I nodded, burst out crying, and we all hugged. When will we see Jessica? I asked. We can visit her tomorrow if you want. The next day, we drove for a few hours until we arrived at the rehabilitation camp. As soon as we got there, Jessica came running towards us, and she crushed us with a huge embrace. I was shocked. Jessica had never hugged me before. I missed you, cried Jessica. My parents sighed in relief, and so did I. I missed Jessica too.